This is Hard Parking, brought to you by Right Honda and Right Toyota out of Scottsdale, Arizona. Speaking of Right Toyota, today, Sunday, December 1st, the toy drive, the bike building. It's always a good time. It's one of those easy things to do where you reach out to local people and say, hey guys, let's go do this. And then you go out and you do it. It only takes up a couple hours of your time, but if you don't donate a toy, it's okay. All you're doing is really donating your time. Now, I did donate to one of the orgs, the .orgs, the charities, but that's beside the point because I said last episode I didn't really buy any bikes this time around. But Jane did find a way to rope the charity portion in to where you could donate and get a donation receipt. So that was good. But we did that, got the bikes done, and then my good friend Mike Tran and I went and had breakfast at Butterfield's. Butterfield's is the preferred breakfast location out in Scottsdale. Didn't do a Thanksgiving episode, but Thanksgiving was great. I decided to roll the dice on a new turkey brine. It's more of a marinade because it used lemon juice, but like the kind you buy and drink, like lemonade, orange juice, apple cider vinegar, a ton of this, a ton of that, a ton of that, a ton of this, and I let it soak for about 24 hours, but I was just kind of worried that it might get too salty. It was probably $25 worth of ingredients to brine this thing, but it ended up being the best turkey I've ever done, according to everybody else that ate the turkey. So really good. But I wanted to talk about Thanksgiving really quick before we get to what's on the docket for this show. Or I'll just tell you this, coming up on this show, we talked to Jay Lopez. Jay Lopez is actively getting treatment for cancer. Local car guy here, met him a few years ago. He's one of my friends in the car community. Don't know him that well. This conversation kind of provided that opportunity for me to get to know him a little better. You know, when people come to me and they tell me that they have these life-threatening illnesses, it tells me that I'm on notice. And I'm on notice to capture them, to capture the spirit of who they are and capture their recovery, their road to recovery. Because for a lot of these people, at least I personally know, they've worked on that road to recovery or they've been playing with house money like John Vassos. And it feels like it's my duty to give that to you, the listener, to learn about somebody else out there that typically wouldn't be asked about their story. But Jay Lopez has a story. John Vassos has a story. Paca, when he was on, has a story. It's my honor to help provide that story. But going back to Thanksgiving really quick, you know, there's always controversy, and we're just getting through this whole woke part of our world, this whole woke agenda. You know, Ferrari came out and said they all stand for diversity and this and that, and they got blown up for being now Ferrari is woke. Can't you just make cars? Just because a company says they're diverse doesn't mean they're woke. You know, wokeism is a bad thing to a certain extent, but you can't be on one end of the spectrum and go all the way to the other end of the spectrum as a person. Let people be people, let companies be companies. And when they shove it in your face and want to cancel you for it, I think that's when the wokeism comes in. Did they need to make a press release saying they stand with FIA and blah, 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 and practicing diversity in the workplace? Probably not, but that doesn't make them a woke company. But that's with this whole Christopher Columbus discovering America, the Pilgrims came, American Indians taught them how to fish and grow their own food, and Thanksgiving is giving thanks for that. That's what we were all told growing up. I'm in my late 40s, and that's what it's always been. Now, my kids probably heard something a little different, and now it's at the point where Christopher Columbus has been vilified and the first settlers have been vilified as stealing the land and all that kind of stuff. And so you don't have to not celebrate Thanksgiving if that's what you believe. History is history. Sometimes there's revisionist history. Sometimes there's lies in history. But what you can still do is take the nature of what Thanksgiving is and apply that to you in your situation, because in my house growing up, we never said, thank you for the Pilgrims and the Indians. That's just what they taught us in school. It was always like, thank you for this food. Thank you for this family, for these friends, for these relationships, for having a roof over my head, for having this dry turkey. It wasn't always dry. My mom's turkey wasn't always dry. Mine's never dry. But that's what Thanksgiving is all about. It's about giving thanks to everything that you have going for you when there's millions of other people who have significantly less. Nothing more. Nothing more. That's what it's about. Giving thanks or helping others. That's what it's about. For over a decade, 4Wheel Online has been bringing the best truck accessories and truck parts to enhance the appearance and performance of all trucks and SUVs. They are dedicated to providing an extensive range of upgrades that will match any make or model on the road. The truck products cover everything to give your truck a custom look and added functionality. Need a wheel and tire package? Head over and use the configuration tool. They carry all the major brands of wheels and tires, so go get outfitted today. Visit them online at 4Wheel Online. So my Infiniti is still broken down in front of the house. I believe we're rolling up on 2 months, maybe 3 months. I'll have to go back and look at my posts. Maybe it's been 2.5, 3 months since the Infiniti broke down on me, since I blew up my radiator. And I've been thinking about it. I've bought all the parts. They're all in the garage. But the problem is the car is on the bottom of the driveway. And when I go out there and I look at it, I think to myself, God, I do not want to jack my car up in the street. Then I got to take the bottom clip off. I might have to take the whole front bumper off because I'm doing the radiator, the cooling fans in that whole unit, the thermostat, new hoses. It's one of those deals where when I think about it, it stresses me out. I thought about just paying someone to come do it, a mobile mechanic. Might cost me $300-$400, which is less than the $6,000 or $7,000 that the dealership wanted to charge me for doing all that. But I got $400 worth of parts sitting in the garage, and I've committed to getting it done. Now my wife says, "Why don't you just sell the Infiniti?" I go, "Well, I've thought about it, but I don't know what I would get because I'm already going to sell the little car." You don't need another car. Just have your NSX and I have my Acura MDX and we can just share cars. I'm just like, what? No, my NSX is not a daily driver. It's a $200,000 car that sits in the garage unless I do a car event or decide to drive somewhere else. But it's not my little errand car. It's not my Home Depot machine. And it's limited anyway as an errand vehicle. She just doesn't get it, I guess. But the thing is, with the Infiniti, I haven't needed it, to be fair. It's the daily, and then I've driven the Honda Z, which is the backup to my backup. But we can't go from 4 cars to 2. It sounds funny. It sounds very first worldy. But I need either my little car, my little Honda Z, or my Infiniti SUV. And if I don't have either, I need to find something else, whether it's an old Honda Civic. I want something that can haul stuff. As little as my Honda Z is, you guys saw on social media that I can put a lot of stuff on that freaking thing. I loaded it up from the storage. We have a storage unit. I loaded the thing up with holiday decorations. I've loaded up with pop-up tents. I had room for 2 10-foot pop-up tents. The pop-up canopies that you have at events. 3 or 4 folding 6-foot tables and 4 folding chairs. And I still could have had a passenger sitting behind me the way I had the thing configured. And it fit in there and it was fine. So I can't not have something as a daily. But I got to get out there and I got to fix that damn thing. Because it's cold as hell in the morning. It's hot as hell in the afternoon. That's Arizona winters for you. Maybe this week. This conversation is brought to you by The Cell Shop, an Arizona-based retailer that strives to be your destination of choice for wireless services, whether Arizona, Washington State, California, Texas, or Florida. They are an authorized AT&T dealer, so visit them at cellshop.us and get connected today. All right, we're now being joined by Jay Lopez. You might know him better as VF1 Skull Angel on social media. Jay, welcome to Hard Parking, man.
Yeah, it's an honor.
So we've kind of known each other in the car scene, and I was trying to think about this earlier. I don't remember the exact day and place that I met you, but I do know that you are, outside of the immediate build team, you're the only person that has anything from the VF1S NSX in that horn button.
Yeah, I just remember accidentally finding you online through a Robotech forum, actually, because whoever took the picture of your NSX, they took it in Tempe, and I thought to myself, "Oh my gosh, this guy is local to me in some way." And I was able to track you down with a couple of questions that way, and we ended up meeting up at the Scudera Southwest in North Scottsdale at a Cars and Coffee event.
You've been all over the place though, because I know that we've been chatting online off and on for the better of. I mean, that was 2017 when I had the car wrap, so we're pulling up on 6.5, 7 years now. To where I think you were here and then you were somewhere else for a job or working on it and then moved out of state, maybe moved back in. Is any of that accurate? Or am I just
I've been around the car scene. It started out in Colorado Springs for me, back in 2003-ish. And I lived out there until 2011 when I moved to San Diego. I lived in Oceanside, was a part of that car community for a while. You probably know who SDC is with Andy Mercado.
Yep.
You're familiar with him? Yeah. So I knew nobody out there in California, and got in touch through mutual friends, and he introduced me to a lot of people. And I spent the better years of 5 years from 2011 till about 2016 when we relocated out here to Mesa with my fiance, with her to be closer to her family. And I kind of started getting to know people out here in the Phoenix area, just reaching out. All right, the people that I know kind of mutually. And, you were one of the first people I actually met, getting to know people out here. So
let's get into some of your car history. You'd mentioned photography earlier off mic, and I don't know if I fully remembered that, but I do remember. I mean, you're always commenting online with stuff, and you seem to know a lot about a lot of things. Where does that come from?
So for me, I've been around, car hobby pretty much since high school. But what really generated my interest with cars started out when I was about 3 years old, through a movie called Speed Zone with the Lamborghini Countach. I just remember the opening scene and thinking, wow, this is the coolest thing ever, besides Robotech at that age. And, then I kind of reconnected with that dream in 1997 as, a sixth grader, failing one of my classes. I just remember my principal at that time saying, hey, you got to get some goals in life, write down something you want to do. And I remember seeing a Ferrari Testarossa during Christmas break that year. And I was just thinking, man, it would be kind of interesting to see a Countach in person. And it escalated to, well, I wonder what it'd be like to drive one. And going forward 6 weeks later from that, I came across Kit Car Magazine. And the dream of owning a Lamborghini all of a sudden now is more attainable. At that time, a Lamborghini Countach kit car would run you about the same price as a C4 Vets. And even as a sixth grader, I was able to think, this is something I could potentially own. So from there on, I started researching Fieros, how to stretch a Fiero, how to V8 swap one. And a lot of my knowledge came from the kit car community, how to turn a Volkswagen Beetle into the Hardcastle McCormick Coyote X. I don't know if that's something you remember growing up.
Sure. That's a good reminder that you're always talking about the kit cars. Now, is it, okay, so Countach, but isn't it, I could be wrong, but it's the Diablo you're working on building now, or what is your dream kit car project?
So my dream kit car project is a Lamborghini Diablo. I mean, in a perfect world, I would love to get my hands on a North American exotic replicas Diablo where it replicates not only just the body, but also the chassis.
Oh, wow.
And you can get these plans online for about $30. And a lot of other, supercar manufacturers have actually pirated this design. I'm not going to say who, but you can tell if some of these cars are apart. It's like, yeah, you can tell that they've taken hints from that particular blueprint. I would love to build one on a level that would make the car more simplified than the real one. I could drive it every day if I wanted to, because the cost of a real Diablo is astronomical. I often compare that to maintaining an F-15 Eagle fighter jet. You know, $45,000 just to drive the car for 6 months before it needs another engine out service. It's crazy. And I think kit cars offer a good alternative for people like you and me who are not necessarily trying to participate in the collector car market. You've seen what happens on Bring a Trailer. These cars are now, the real ones are going for almost $1 million now.
Right.
And pretty soon these cars are going to become unattainable, like a Mira, for instance. Countach's are even up there in the millions. So I know the Diablo's on its way up there. So I think what we're going to see here pretty soon is these higher end kit cars are going to start looking more and more attractive for people who used to be able to afford a real Diablo. Hey, they can't get a real one, but they might be able to get their hands on a North American exotic replicas car. And I think we're going to see some kind of an increase there to some extent.
So you've done obviously a lot of research on this over the years. Like how much money, because it sounds like it could be a very expensive project. Obviously it's not going to probably cost as much as getting the actual car, but it sounds like something it could be like your life project unless you just have a few money laying around.
So it really depends. I always ask people, it depends on what route you want to go. Do you want to take a Fiero and start with that? You could probably build it for under 50 grand. And then if you really want to go crazy with it, it's not uncommon to almost cost as much as the real thing. I mean, John Cena recently just sold his Lamborghini replica, and that sold for 140,000. But when you go back and you look at his interview and you watch it, he mentioned, through trial and error that it costed him as much as the real thing and a half.
Oh, sure.
And that's not uncommon, for guys that are not familiar. And unfortunately, in this kit car world, you're going to find a lot of scammers who are going to try to take advantage of you. And that's something I'd like to warn a lot of your viewers. If you're looking at potentially buying a car, it looks too good to be true. It probably is. I would advise go see it in person before any money exchanged.
Right. What's the company that makes the replica AC Cobras? I think those are over $100,000 a piece.
Yeah, that is, there's actually a few companies. There's Superformance, there's Factory 5. And these are reputable.
That's the one I was thinking of.
And these are reputable companies that have been around for years. You won't see as many, I guess, scams happening in the Ford and GT40 crowd. But with the Lamborghini replicas, it was wild just a few years ago with companies like Super Replicas that would promise you, oh, you could get this Ferrari Enzo with the V12 engine for $30,000. And then when you actually put the numbers, go research what it would cost you to build, it's like, this doesn't sound right. And they're going to tell you everything you want to hear just to get a deposit from you. And then you never hear back from them.
Yikes.
Yeah. So, and there was actually a guy here locally here in Phoenix. I'm not going to mention his name, but he was pretty popular building LP640 replicas. And I just remember a few years ago, he took a guy for a run for well over $100,000 on a Remington kit, promising him the world, oh, this is going to be built. And he never followed through with his promises. So,
oh, geez.
Yeah.
So there's guys like that, unfortunately, all throughout the industry. A lot of us know those are the guys who you pay to build your motor or do something as an add-on to your car, and they just basically keep your car as ransom and they never do the work, or they take your money and spend it on other projects. There's a lot of crappy people in this car world that we live in.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate.
Let's take a couple steps back to your diagnosis. I seem to have the podcast where I bring my car buddies on and any number of cancer diagnosis. Take us back, because you're currently going through treatments for which cancer?
So my cancer, it could be named one of two things. It's called rectal carcinoma, or it's also known as metastatic cancer, which means it's spread to multiple places. So, it's been something that's been potentially going on for several years now, because a few years ago I was medically gaslighted. I had some mild symptoms. Went in, checked it out, and they said, "Oh, you probably have hemorrhoids. You just need to lose weight and you'll be fine." Go forward 2 years now, I have, bleeding in a certain area as
Sure.
well as cramps. So my fiance, guardian angel, she's just like, you need to go get seen by a doctor, and you're not going to let up with it. You're going to demand that it just goes beyond just a simple appointment. So we did that, and it was just that's pretty much how the process started. Was back in I would say February of this year. I went to my doctor now. Then I was referred to a gastroenterologist. Had eh, my colonoscopy, and had to wait 2 weeks. And the way she told me was awful. I went to the office. I knew she had some news. I was like, okay, what'd you guys find? She's sitting on the computer like, oh, wait for this to load up. We did it. We did intercept a precancerous, polyp. We're like, okay. What's the big news? What's the big news? And, she just said, oh, you have rectal carcinoma. It's like, well, what the heck is that?
Right.
If somebody says, hey, you have rectal carcinoma, it's like, okay, that's Spanish. What is it exactly that I have? And she just said, oh, you have cancer. It's like, oh, great. No sympathy, no nothing. It was like talking to a computer.
Was this like an MA or like a nurse?
This was actually a gastroenterologist out in Tempe. I won't go into too much detail
Right.
with her. So she referred me to Ironwood of Scottsdale. Now, this is where I'm actually getting treatment at. By the way, the best medical facility, best treatment I've received medically so far. That's when I found out through my doctor. Her name's Dr. Klein. She is great. Yeah, she told me it's more than just, cancer of the rectum. It had gone up the lymph node. It's in my liver, and it possibly is in my lungs in stage 4. So imagine hearing that, 2-3 weeks later after you hear you got cancer. It's just like, oh, and by the way, it's spread.
Right.
So I'm sitting down here breaking down, he literally picks me off the ground because I'm like, I'm getting ready to say goodbye to my family and friends. You hear stage 4. We read it up online on Google. It says it's pretty much over. Not once did she mention anything about hospice, end stage. It's just, hey, we got you, Jay. We're gonna fight this thing. We're gonna take the best care of that. We're gonna do what we can. And so far they have. She's never spoken to me in any, doubt that you might not come up, you might come up short, and none of that. It's confidence, it's positivity. Every time I go there, yeah, it's a little stressful going to a cancer facility to find out what's the next step going to be. But, every time I go to Ironwood, it's like visiting it's like visiting a friend or a family. You're not as stressed out going there. And people know who you are there to ask you questions about you. Hey, how you doing? It's just, it's been a good experience, even though cancer itself has been a rough experience for me, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, you can curse on this, by the way, because I think you're going to say it's been a bitch. So what was scarier, her dropping that on you, or learning later that it's metastatic?
For me, it was learning later on that it was metastatic. I thought at that point, I'm done. This is it.
Right. Metastatic. I said it wrong. Sorry.
Oh no, it goes metastatic, metastasize.
Yeah.
That to me was probably the most terrifying news I've received this year. And when all of this was going on, I was actually supposed to head out to Florida to go see my family. I haven't seen them in 10 years. And my little brother was getting married. So to some extent, it felt like I had let him down. But, he was really encouraging. His wife was really encouraging. They're like, you get well. We'll all reconnect when, everything is going good. Just focus on you. And I always tell people I have the best little brother in the world.
I mean, what do you do, right? All you can do is you have the right people leaning on you. Thank God your fiance was like, no, we're going to do this. Because was it easy for her to get you to do it? Or were you kind of like your stubborn, traditional male where it's like, it'll be fine. I'll figure it out. Or at that point, you're like, yeah, maybe. Because, you're a little older. Like, we're both getting up there in age.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably easier
So,
for us to be convinced to do something like that than maybe when we're in our mid-20s.
so for me, I mean, I work in the HVAC industry, which is, doing commercial work. It's construction. We beat the hell out of each other every day. It's not uncommon for guys to bleed in areas. And to me, I thought this was a part of the gig. And,
Mm,
after a while, when she's seen how much this is affecting me on a day-to-day basis, it's like, no, something's wrong. And I'm not going to lie, I didn't want to go through with it.
sure.
I knew, given the history of my mom, she's been through cancer on and off for several years now. And I know kind of what it's like to go through. Prior, I just did not want to go through with it. But then she got her family involved, and it was just like, okay, you're going to get outvoted now. There's no, I'm running away from this. It's now you have an overwhelming amount of support. Then friends started getting involved. Churches started praying for me, and it was just like, no, you're committed. You're going to do this. You have a community behind you, pushing you now to go through this valley of hell, as I would call it. They're going to carry you through it. That'd be the best way I can describe it.
So how are you feeling today?
So
What's the circus like for you now versus starting off?
For me, it's not so much the disease itself, because the disease itself, it has very mild symptoms. It's mostly the frustration from the financial devastation. And
Mm,
then that alone can kill most people, just
right,
stressing out about it.
right.
And then, you can't work. You have to depend on Social Security now, like in my situation. And dealing with them is like dealing with, adolescent kids. They don't want to return your call. They don't listen to you. And it's very frustrating at
You
times.
feel like just a number, maybe? Like they're going through the motions?
Oh, yeah. And then it's like they try to push you back, like, oh, we need you to wait 5 months before you qualify for disability. It's like they want you to kick the bucket beforehand.
Right.
That's what I felt like the last 5 months. And, thankfully that's going to change here pretty soon. Um, but, other than that, the cancer itself, I have very mild symptoms. There's some days where it hurts, other days, like today, I don't feel like I have cancer. I feel like I can do a lot. Um, the chemo, on the other hand, like I would advise everybody, it's going to feel like, um, imagine the worst hangover you've ever had times 10.
Mm.
That's what chemotherapy is going to feel like. You're going to feel like crap the first day. I advise, people, hey, make sure somebody's taking you and bringing you to, your chemo treatment. There's no way you can drive. When you get home, you're probably going to want to go to sleep and rest it off. It does get better with time, but man, that first initial treatment, you're going to feel like crap.
Now, do they have you on chemo pills, or do you have to go through the other traditional way?
So with me, they first I got a port catheter installed. It's like a little
Is that the grenade you posted?
no, that's a little different. That actually attaches to my port catheter. That runs down a bloodstream. It's connected to my chest, like a little there's a vein around my chest area.
Mm-hmm.
They do connect to that. That runs you can run infusions through it. You can pull blood through it. It's a really cool device. I was pretty excited to get one. My fiance also has a port catheter for iron infusions, and it works really well if you're familiar with it. So through that, they can connect your chemo directly. They can connect any infusions you might need, and it's virtually painless. I barely feel the needle, and the needle's about an inch long, and it goes right into the port catheter. It drips the chemo. So for me, I go there, I get chemo for about an hour and a half, and then they send me home with the little hand grenade that I posted the other day. That's got to stick with me for 48 hours. And then depending on my lab work, I either will have to get infusion or what I'd like to call the stick, which is the bone marrow medication that'll make you incredibly tired because your body's now producing bone marrow.
Oh, you had mentioned about the bone. I've heard the bone marrow injections are the worst.
Yeah, they are. I mean, I wake up, it feels like I played a night in the NFL every morning. Like that night after, it hits you so hard. You don't want to get out of bed. It is the worst.
I have a good friend, Paka, who was on here a couple Christmases ago, and he had to go through some of that treatment. And fortunately, he beat it, and he's well and healthy. So, what does your prognosis look like? What is your road to recovery? Or have they noticed some of the stuff shrinking and going away, or is it just kind of balancing itself out? Like, what's the report?
So the report with me, the last time I went, which is almost 3 months ago, they just did a CT of the areas that are affected. Things are rapidly reducing. I have another one coming up here pretty soon. Um, and from there on, they're going to determine what the next step's going to be, whether it's going to be more chemo, targeted therapy. Surgery is the third option. That's the one that terrifies me the most. I've already looked at it, made the mistake of going on YouTube and looking at it.
Yeah.
Um,
The information's out there if you're that curious.
So, I mean, yeah, and I would advise anybody that's potentially going what I'm going through, just stay away from Google because there's a lot of misinformation on there about cancer in general, as well as some of these treatment options.
You didn't go to WebMD, did you?
I'm not going to lie, I did when my family member, because I unfortunately lost my aunt and uncle to both colon cancer.
Right. Sorry to hear that. But you can't go to WebMD. That's like the worst website ever.
My fiance tells me all the time,
right?
Stay out WebMD. But yeah, you hear a lot of once you reach stage 4 cancer, it's over. And, I've been doing pretty good for the last 6 months having this, knowing I've had this. And I feel like at some point in time in the near future, I'm going to get the good news that I'm going to be cancer free, and I get to go back to what I was doing.
That's the right outlook. Well, thank you for sharing that part, Jay. Let's go back to the cars, man. What are you, because you're an old schooler. And when I say old schooler, you love like the Countachs and the Diablos, the 90s, 80s, exotic sports cars. What are you excited about today? And let me ask you a fundamental question that I ask a lot of people that love the old school. What was your poster car first?
So my poster cars have always been the Countach. I still actually have one of my childhood poster Countach pictures, believe it or not. Then it was the Diablo McLaren F1. Literally, like if you were to walk into my house as a kid, you would have seen one of my walls would have been covered with cars. A lot of it came from the Need for Speed games. They used to give out posters. And what am I most excited about today? Unfortunately, supercars nowadays are just not as exciting as they used to be.
Why do you think that is? I think it's a psychological thing, but why does Jay Lopez, Mr. VF1 Skull Angel, have that opinion?
I just see a lot of just good enough craftsmanship with a lot of these supercars. Now they're doing away with manual transmissions. Now they're doing away with, you can't really jump in a car like a McLaren F1 and really feel connected with the road. Now you look at what it's replaced by. It's replaced by technology. You can't really buy a supercar with a manual. I think the only one is Koenigsegg, and Hennessy just released one with a manual transmission as well. But a lot of these cars are going also to hybrid systems. It's really, they're really hard at work, in my opinion, to take the driver out of the driver's seat. And it's like, well, let's drive the car for you, essentially. That's first and foremost. And then I get the whole reducing the carbon emissions thing, going from a big old V12 engine to a twin turbo V6. It just doesn't make sense for, like, say, for instance, Ferrari to have its entry-level car with a V12. They have an SUV with a V12, but their flagship, their special car, has a twin-turbo V6 hybrid. That just, to me, it's silly. It's almost like they're going backwards with it.
Can I play devil's advocate a little bit on that?
Okay.
So when you have the poster wall or the poster cars, you have the Countach, you have the Diablo, you have the McLaren F1. You're not driving any of those cars. You're in love with how they look.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes,
and also the kid version of you looks at things differently than the adult version of you.
Mm-hmm.
So you think it's really the hybrid technology, or like I think it's access. we have access now. We don't have to sit there and daydream at one picture. We can just pull up the internet or pull up our phones and look at as many pictures as we want. Fortunately for you and I, we live in an area where we have Highline Auto Cars and Coffee. We have Barrett Jackson.
Right.
We have, like, they bring the cars to us. And so I have to wonder if these kids even dream that much about cars because they're literally everywhere. Because you and I came up in an era where we had to go to the poster store.
Right. And, even seeing a Lamborghini was a very rare sighting. Now you drive around North Scottsdale, you're going to at least see a Huracan, a Urus driving around, and then occasionally a Velador. Yeah. 20 years ago, you would have never seen a Countach driving around in broad daylight.
And now you
still
can
dumb.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Not often,
right place,
but
right time.
Exactly. It was the imagination, right? So much was left up to our imaginations is just sit there and daydream about something that we may never see. We grew up and was able to see it. Now I just feel like the imagination, your brain doesn't have to work anymore.
Right.
And I think that might be a part of why things are different. But I understand for you the whole hybrid stuff, and unfortunately there's no getting away from that.
Yeah.
And, cars are designed for people, not enthusiasts, unless you're such a cash flow rich company or somebody decides to put out that special Porsche that you have to wait in line for forever to even buy it, but it may come with a manual in it.
Yeah. And, that's why I don't know if some of you guys follow me on Instagram, but there's a little car that I designed after the Northrop YF-23. I call it the Black Widow 3 or Corsario, which is individual in Spanish, or Corsair in Spanish. Someday I hope to produce that car. It's 3D printed. It's modeled after the Astera Commendatory 112i, as well as the Tommy Car ZC2, as well as the Vector W8, with the intent of, like you were saying, something that, maybe would be a one-off someday.
That'd be neat.
I don't know. Yeah. Right now I'm designing it for me, but if it does somehow take off and other people want to buy it, great. If not, hey, at least I would like to have that one copy for me. Knowing I'm never going to get my hands on those 3 cars, even if I was super wealthy. Because they're one of one in most cases. Well, except for the Vector, I might be able to get one, but the Astera, I already talked to the owner. He's not selling it. And Tommy Car, those guys in Japan, it's hard to communicate when it's from Japanese to English. They're like, what are you talking about?
Sure.
But, just certain cars, it just makes you think, oh, what if I take the best of these 3 and put them together? And that's what I've essentially tried to do.
So let me ask you this, because you want to build the Diablo and you want to build your custom car that you've been 3D printing and designing. Which one are you building first? If you can only build one, which one is it going to be?
I feel like the Diablo would have to be the first to be built, because without getting the proper hands-on experience of building a car from ground zero, you're never going to get a good supercar going forward beyond that. That's just my opinion. I don't want to build something that is going to be an abomination later on. If I'm going to go from the Diablo kit car, the goal is to eclipse that, and you just got to start somewhere, and that would be where I would like to start.
Fair enough. Let me ask you this, as I'll get you out of here pretty soon. So it was earlier this year where you got diagnosed with cancer. I think you're saying everything started in February, going to the doctor. We're tailing off this year right now. We're recording this toward the end of November. Has that, in getting that throughout the course of the year, and especially with Thanksgiving and the holidays coming up, has that changed your mindset on how to approach different things? Or just because it seems like it'd be kind of like you wouldn't be able to actually control that.
Mm-hmm.
But has it changed anything, do you think? Or maybe you won't know until those days come? Do you look around at family and friends a little differently?
I look at life definitely a lot more differently since being diagnosed. Best term I use is I've never felt so wealthier, because the idea of having everything that you currently have, and it doesn't matter if you're actually, net worth 0 or net worth 100 million, the idea that, this all might be taken away from you, it definitely changes your perspective. Just that idea that you might not make it.
Right. Involuntarily.
And to me, just having that, being shaken for a minute, has made me appreciate life 10 times, 100 times more. I'm very happy to wake up every day and have the very little that I have the people around me that, I know of. I mean, you don't really appreciate that until the threat of that, what you have right now is about to be taken away from you. To me, I feel very fortunate with my current situation. I'm very fortunate to have my fiance, her family, my family, even just making amends with my father, that we've had a strained relationship. Everything just kind of comes to, perspective by, wow, I have a great life. I'm very fortunate to have this. And, I wake up every day and I try to be as happy as I can. That this is incredible because I know it could always be worse. This could be taken away from me at any given moment. We're here on borrowed time.
We take life for granted. And like my relationship with you, right? So I'm like, okay, Jay Lopez, or as I always call you, Jay Michael Lopez. If I run into you out and about, awesome, I got to see Jay today. But if I don't, then I don't. But the fact that, you told me about this, I was like, holy crap. That was deep that you even told me. And maybe you were telling everybody because that's one of those involuntary triggers that happens when you get that kind of news. But I still consider myself very fortunate for you to have personally told me. And, I was like, okay, I've always known you're out there. I've always wanted to have a conversation with you. I've always thought you would be great on the podcast. I go, man, I got to make sure I get him on the podcast to tell his story because I would forever be kicking myself if I didn't get this opportunity. And so I want to thank you for giving me that opportunity because you've been a good friend over the years. And again, we don't know each other extremely well, but you're one person I could always count on for support if I ever needed it. And, again, you're the only one who has a piece of the old car and you have a very rare piece. Like nobody else has that. And you have that.
Yeah. And I have that right next to my Bible in my F-15 Eagle patch that was given to me a couple years ago. And I use that as my motivation to get through this. It's like, as long as I have these three things over, sitting right next to my bedside, I feel like these bad omens, these demons essentially, will stay away from me. And I use the Bible, obviously for my faith in Christ. I use the F-15 Eagle as like a dream catcher of negative things, to keep those demons away. Cause it's essentially 104, 106 victories to 0 losses, air to air losses.
Wow.
So that's like my representation of, okay, go ahead, send some negativity towards me. I've got something that, is protecting me at all hours. And then my love and compassion for technology, medicine, I don't know what I would represent, what would represent. So I put that horn there as kind of like, okay, this is science, this is technology to represent that. So that's on my dresser every night when I go to sleep.
Yeah, when you made that post, I was like, wow. And just so people know, this isn't something, and Jay can back me up on this. It's not that Jay told me about his diagnosis and I'm like, okay, let me give you a token to get you through it. You've had that. I've gave you that years ago just because you're such an amazing person.
And I do appreciate that. But I appreciate that piece of art. I love the show growing up. It was my favorite TV show growing up as a kid. And the fact that you're able to infuse cars with that has been a pretty incredible thing to do. I would have never thought of doing that myself, and it's just so executed and it was like it was meant to be. So I try to keep that little horn up there as a representation of my passion for technology.
Well, I appreciate that. So this is Jay, VF1 Skull Angel on social media. Jay, what's something you want everybody to know about or to walk away from this incredible conversation? What's the last thing you want them to think about?
I just would say to anybody, if you're ever faced in a situation where, you have weird symptoms like mine, which could be embarrassing, don't be afraid to go see a doctor about it. And if God forbid, they sit down here and they tell you it's stage 4 cancer, I want everybody to know, as long as they don't mention something as hospice, end stage, you're still in it, in my opinion. Be prepared to fight like hell. You're going to get beat up. It's going to be a rough ride. It's going to be a very stressful one going through this, but I do firmly believe anybody can get through it with the right mindset and with the right resources. So, just hang in there and do the very best you can. If I can do this, certainly anybody else can.
Well said, Jay Lopez. And I will see you at a Cars and Coffee at some point.
Absolutely. Same here. And, I'm going to get 100 more pictures of your NSX. Every time I see it, I always want to get a couple pictures.
Well, the new one's different, obviously. You've seen that. So it's not, it's cooler, but not as cool in the same breath.
Yeah, but I know which one is your NSX. I always see the little podcast sticker, and I know who that guy is every time I see it. And I tell everybody around, like, hey, that's Jay over there. Go check him out.
Stop. Stop. All right, Jay, have a good one.
Yeah, you as well. You have a good day.
Want to thank Jay Lopez, VF1 Skull Angel. I've never really had that kind of conversation with him before. It's just been online, messaging, or, hey, man, what's up? In person, in passing at some of the local Cars and Coffee events. But like I said, I recognized him as someone who really appreciated my old SEMA build. And that's why I took that horn button, because I had 2 horn buttons made. I took one of them, I packaged it up, and I mailed it to him and said, here you go, man. I signed it and said, here you go. Pretty sure I signed it. And years later, he gets diagnosed with cancer. And then he posts online that, with the book that he has, my little horn button is right there. And every night it's right there. And I'm just like, man, I got to get this guy on the podcast, and I'm so glad I did. And hopefully you guys enjoyed that. It got a little car talk, but this is an automotive podcast. We can talk about cars too. But if you know somebody out there that's struggling, that gets that word from the doctor, and it's the sky is falling, and let them know of the stories. Let them know of the stories that we talk about on this podcast when I have people that come on that have cancer and are fighting cancer. Because I don't know how I'd react if I got that bad negative news from a physician. And I don't, I'd have to think that we would do everything we could to try to get rid of it like normal people would. But you still have to feel like, you ever had an elective outpatient surgery, someone has gone in for something that's like, okay, we found this, we found that. I got to go in for this surgery. It's really quick. It should be 30 minutes in and out, elective outpatient surgery. No big deal. They do it all the time. It's almost like when I had LASIK. Everyone said when you get LASIK, you can see immediately. And that's bullshit. You can't. Most people can't. And my eyes were screwed. And then I went in for a touch-up and they were screwed even worse. Now, 2 years later, I'm okay. I need reading glasses. But it's one of those deals where no matter how benign they say something is, you still freak out about it because you could be that one person out of 50,000 that has an adverse reaction. Now imagine being told that you have cancer, that it is malignant, not benign, which is bad, very bad. And either the physician doesn't seem like they really care too much because they're so detached, they're so used to it, they're so dismissive, or it's just news you just feel like the sky is falling because statistically the sky is falling. It's just a matter of when it's going to fall, not if it's going to fall. That's got to be a lot. That's going to be a lot to hear that. It's got to be a lot to hear that someone very close to you is getting that news. So hope you guys appreciated that. I did. And it's forever going to be cemented in Hard Parking Podcast. Jay freaking Michael Lopez is a guest. This Friday coming up, December 6th, that's my event, hosting it at Wright Honda with the One Auto Movement, obviously Hard Parker Media, and we have, like I said last week, Noel G. plays Hector in all these movies. You can look him up. Steve Villegas, Cesar Garcia, and Ryan Ochoa. It's going to be awesome. They're in town for Fuel Fest, but they're going to be at Wright Honda this Friday, December 6th from 6 to 9. Bring an unwrapped gift and hang out with us. It's called Donate and Chill. So just show up and chill and hang out with the boys. They're going to have merchandise there for sale. You could sign them, buy it from them. They'll take pictures with you. It's going to be a good time. It always is a good time. Texas Longhorns headed to the SEC Championship. You know, I'm a diehard college football fan. I never talk much crap when it comes to my team. I'm a little superstitious when it comes to that. They beat the brakes off the Aggies. The final score of 17-7 does not indicate how bad that ass whooping really was. It should have and could have easily been 35-0, maybe 40-0. It was a ass whooping of epic proportions. That was the most expensive regular season college football game, I believe, in history on average ticket. The average ticket price to attend a college football game was over $1,000. And when they did the pregame, you know how the Aggies getting ready to come out of the tunnel and they get all the fans going? I don't think I've ever seen anything that awesome. Like, that was awesome. Didn't mean anything. Got their ass whooped, but that was awesome. But I'm excited to get Q back on here and we can talk about the college football and what the playoffs are going to look like, because after this next weekend, we're going to know. All the championship games are coming up this Saturday, November 7th. Texas versus Georgia for the SEC. It's a rematch. That's the only loss Texas had all year, was when Georgia came to Austin and beat the Longhorns 30-15. And that game was actually closer than the score indicates, in my opinion. Maybe I'm a homer. So that being said, I want to thank Wright Honda, Wright Toyota, Toyota of Huntington Beach, Claremont Toyota, and Gardenia Honda, 4wheelonline.com, the aforementioned Sales Shop Wireless Services, AutoCannon, officially licensed Honda and Acura gear, Patreon business supporters, Automotive Specialty Tool out of Owensville, Maryland, Puya Automotive out of Winter Garden, Florida, Pell Construction out of Condon, Michigan, Big House Small Home Design out of Ashburn, Virginia, and Traverse City, Michigan, Shipping Success with West Tankersley out of Boise, Idaho. Guys, on social media, I put out, now, you can join the Patreon for free. I always say for as little as $3 a month, but it's actually free. You can join for free. I also open up a $1 tier. So you're telling me, if you like this podcast, I'm not worth 25 cents a week? 25 cents a week. I'm not worth that? Even the $3 tier, if you really think about it, that's one drip coffee a month. One drip coffee a month. That's not even a specialty brew. No, I'm not going to shame you. I'm not going to come after you. I know a lot of you I talk to about this podcast that you aren't Patreons. And trust me, I know who you are. I appreciate you listening to the podcast, though. But I know who you are. But for those of you, like the Mark Stoneman, Catherine Cox, Eddie Ramos, Richard Graves, Byron Jones, Bo Jung, Oscar Mina, Drew Bunkley, and Yasu Chiba, thank you so much. Email the show, hardbarkingpodcast@gmail.com. Holiday gifts are coming soon. Follow me on Instagram at j.pfenning. Join the Hard Barking Violations Facebook group. I can't grow like tell the world how great this show is. Let's do this. Let's reel this in together, and I will talk to you all next week.
Shut up!